Welcome, everyone. My name is Helena Natt. I'm the Executive Director with the Greater New York Chamber. And we've been doing the webinars, and they have been really, really popular for, the last, I would say I've been doing this for like 20 years, but the last 2.5 years have been really important to provide as much information to the businesses. And the reason why we are doing these, we were pretty much doing these pretty often, is the Greater New York Chamber mission is to provide as much information to grow your business, whether it's online networking or our clubhouse networking or our expos or our international trade receptions. We are always providing opportunities for businesses, A, to get together, B, share their knowledge, and C, to grow the economy, for you to hire other people and to really build back New York of the way it should be. And talking about sharing knowledge, we have Pierre Dubois from Zimana, and he is our clubhouse leader. We do clubhouse Mondays at 2:00. And what happens is he has so much wealth of knowledge, and he is very knowledgeable when it comes to analytics. I don't know if you talk to me about marketing, I could talk to you all day long. You ask me about analytics for websites on SEO, you know what? We go to Pierre for that. So you're in for a real great treat. This presentation is being recorded. Everyone will receive a copy of the deck. Please put your questions in the chat, and we're going to wait for him to do the presentation, and then we can go back to the Q&A. But right now, Pierre, thank you so much for your knowledge, for your knowledge in this area and your expertise in analytics. And everyone, you're in for a real treat, because he's going to, simplify it, because a lot of this stuff is, to me, over my head, but he makes it so simple that I can understand it. So Pierre, take it away. And again, thank you for doing this.
Thank you, Helena. Thank you for that warm introduction, and good morning, everyone. My name is, as Helena mentioned, my name is Pierre Dubois. I am the founder of Zimana Analytics. That's Z. It's my privilege and pleasure to present this presentation to you. This is an update from actually over the last year or so, and also an update based off of our past presentation. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk a lot about a starter presentation more than anything else. I know that many of you probably have heard a little bit about GA4 and the transition to GA4. We're going to talk a little bit. This presentation is really about planning around that and getting it done, and I'll explain why in a bit. And we're going to tie a little bit to what we talked about. Last presentation, we focused more on general marketing. The reason why is because over the years, I've been doing this now since 2009, and Google Analytics has been around even further than that. And analytics in general has been around even further than that. But most of the analytics tools like Google Analytics, those have been built around digital marketing. So our previous presentation, if you haven't had a chance to take a look at it, check it out. It's on YouTube. You can go back and look at and get some ideas of general marketing as well. But we'll talk a little bit about that, get into the starter reporting that helps trends relative to your website or app and relative to your business, and learn a little bit about the reporting options that can blend into your operations. So without further ado, let's get into it. We talked a lot in our previous presentation about shifts in online customer behavior, the pandemic. We were already dealing with people online, finding our websites through a mobile device, being able to order, being able to call, and that type of thing. But analytics helps you in organizing a lot of that marketing. That it's very critical. Without it, you have no real meaningful sense of what direction your business is going. So you need to have some idea and tie that back to an analysis. That's the basic value from it. And it doesn't just have to be impact on marketing. It can also have an impact in how you operate, what sort of what sort of supplies that you need to order, what sort more effectively. There's more analytics that deals with that. We won't get into that part of it too deeply, but just to let you know, that's out there. But all of this can help you analyze and identify how your messages are attracting your customers regularly. That's the key part of this from Google Analytics. And then helping you to kind of decide what are the channels that we're using to attract those customers and reconsider how we are spending on those channels. So let's get into what planning and analytics installation entails. Let's get into the nitty gritty. The biggest part of this is as a business owner is taking, and I have a picture here. This may be a little interesting. This picture is of a friend of mine, unfortunately, who had passed away several years ago, but he was one of my earliest clients, Greg Crook. He and I grew up in Gary, Indiana. And Greg's story, the reason why I mention him here in particular is that when I caught up to him, and Greg was thinking about updating his website, but he had all these images that he just had not incorporated into a website. In fact, this is one of them we took as a kind of a starter image to help.
Hold on, Pierre, you're still on the first slide. Are you still on? Which slide are you on?
I should say, take time to gather your content.
No, it says, I see just the first slide.
Okay. I'll tell you what. Let me take this. Tell you what, let's playback mode. That might be the problem. Give me 2 seconds here.
Okay.
Let's see if I can get this out.
If someone can answer, just make sure that, is he still on the first slide? Because it just might be my computer, but there we go.
Okay. So what I'm going to just play back. It may not be liking it very well. I apologize a little bit for that. Can you see? You should see Alex is strategizing well.
Yes, perfect.
Okay. All right. I'm going to use this. I think there may be something between Zoom and Keynote that it doesn't like. So I won't mess with it. I'll just go through the slides this way.
Yeah, if you can, because you're freezing a little bit. So, okay. Yeah, go.
Okay. All right. Okay. Do I sound a little bit better now?
Yes, a lot better.
Okay. Okay, great. Okay, so here's the deal. So this is Greg. I'll go back to this. And I love this picture because we took this because he had all these. He owned his own studio and he had a DJ service. And he had all these pictures except for him behind his mixing board, which is a big deal because he also had a recording artist they worked with at the time. But I say all this as a reminder is that, given the pandemic, you have a lot of content. If you've been in business for the last 2 years or even before that. What you want to do is gather your materials. Gathering images, any sort of content that you may want to incorporate into a website if you haven't already, gathering white papers, and then campaigns as well too. And we'll get a little bit more into that as we move forward. So you're gathering all this, and what you want to do is start thinking about if you're launching a website or launching an app, you want to think about mapping your website, and you want to think about tags. A bit. Tags is just basically the little scripts of JavaScript that's added to each web page, which tells your analytics solution when that web page is loaded into a browser, or if it's a web app, when that web page is loaded into a browser, or if it's just an app, when someone has reached their app. But Google Analytics over the last few years has kind of switched more towards what's called events, and we'll talk about that in one of the reportings in a bit. But the point of this is that you can do this exercise through software. You can do this on a whiteboard. But what you want to do is that you really want people to do. What are the things you want them to track? Those will be like things like downloading a white paper. That could be making a purchase. Again, purchasing an item online, registering for an event, signing up for an email subscription. Each usually triggers what's called an event. An event is just a very general developer term. It just means that when there's somebody's clicking on a button that something happens, an activity happens, an event. And then the next thing you want to think about is what do you want to have captured from that event? And variable for JavaScript. It's variables are just think of them as containers, things that you would label to call that particular event. It could be a purchase button, it could be a subscription button, it could be a download button for a white paper, and so forth. But you want to call these out in each bit, have a sense of what the layout is on your website, and not in terms of code, but just in terms of, again, are there subdomains? And if so, are they part of a website or hosted somewhere else? Because that will dictate how you want your tags to be added. One more thing, this may be if you're launching a website, or if you are thinking about adding tags to your website, I won't go through this too deeply, but this is also a good time to do an SEO check as well too. In most cases, what people do now is that they look at what types of websites are linked to the main web page, but you could also look for search patterns on words that people may be using online. Most people are very aware of Google Trends, but there are also similar tools to Google Trends for each one of the social media's Snapchat trends, where you can go and look and see what words people are searching for in Snapchat. There's a Pinterest trends where you can go and look and see what words people are searching for in Pinterest. Those sort of things are important if you plan on using social media on those particular platforms. You want to think about in Google Search Console, which is a separate tool. You want to also look at what the performance report is. If you have a website that's been out for a while, seeing what keywords have brought people towards your site. So getting a sense of that, even just a little bit, can help you in choosing how to update how you label your links when you want. So with this in mind, we look at trying to add a Google Analytics ID, and there's a couple of things you want to do here. There's kind of two parts of it. One part is the actual ID. The second, get to a couple of slides. So just I'll talk a little bit about this, but one of the things that have come up in the last several months or so is that Universal Analytics, which is the older version of Google Analytics, is going away. Been around with us now for not quite a year, but close to. It's going to be the new platform moving forward. So we're going to talk, our reports will talk to that. But what you want to do between now and when Universal Analytics goes away, which I put in red bold, it goes away July 1st of next year. You have until update your Google Analytics, basically. So this is something you want to get in front of as soon as possible. That'll give you chances to not only have both accounts side by side, but also kind of see how the features change. There's been changes in Google Analytics over the last several months. In fact, we're going to get ready for this presentation. So given that, what you want to do is select an account and then a property, and then there's an assistant built into the Google Analytics administration, which is called a GA4 setup assistant. And that assistant can give you a choice GA4 account, and this is perfect if you never had a GA account before and you just launch your website, or connecting to an existing account, which means you're connecting to an existing Universal Analytics account. One other thing you want to keep in mind here is that you want to think about who's also going to be, who would be the account administrators. And these are people who are probably going to be responsible for reporting within your organization. And that could be you, that could be an analytics person who you're working with, like me, hint, 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 or maybe another marketer as well too. But who's going to be following up on this as well? That access becomes very important. One thing I want to note here too is that one of the features that did get changed in Google Analytics is that they used to have what was called annotation, where you can put notes down, jot down and say, hey, we've made this update on this date. Analytics 4, but there's what's called a property change history that's within the admin, and you can use that to kind of see when people have had access to your analytics and what the dates are that they've had access. So it might be a good one to kind of help to figure out when people are working with your tools quite a bit. So on top of settings, there's a couple other settings you want to think about. One of them, and this may depend upon how your business is organized, is to think about IP filters. IP filters are your analytics is designed to identify your where visits are coming from based off of IP, and you may want to filter out local or internal traffic if you have let's say a couple of offices that have access to your web page, and you want to filter that out, or even set up a separate reporting account for that within the analytics admin. I've indicated that here with under properties, what's called in a section called data streams and web streams. You can actually go back and set up the IP as well. Is that doing this, you still want to have some sort of version of your account where there's no filter. Sometimes for diagnostics, it can help you in figuring out if there's problems with bots, bugs, some sort of loading problem with your web page. Having a filtered version of your account is very helpful. And then another thing you want to keep in mind is that you want to also set what's called data retention. And this is a Google Analytics 4 is designed to keep data up to from 2 months to 14 months. After that point, you can still access your basic reporting, but some of the things in explorations, which I'll get to in a couple of slides, will not be available. It by default is set for 2 months, but you can actually go into the admin and set it for 14, and that'll give you a window of confidence to go back through just in case you want there's be some confidence in there, basically. So I add this also to let you know that a lot of times making delays in updating your tags, you're actually making delays in analysis and getting in certain data. So you definitely want to kind of keep up with that. So with that in mind, so all this was for setting up the GA4. The next step is setting up what's called Tag Manager. Google Tag Manager is the actual script. Let me back up a little bit. It's an actual script that you can add to your website or app and make changes that you've selected or variables you selected. It makes it a little bit easier. Without this, the problem that you run into is that some features may not work in the reporting, and then more importantly, you can create an actual workload for your developers or for the people who may be working on your website, because there's some changes that are within Tag Manager that makes it easier without touching a website or taking down a web page to do so. So you want to make it simpler. So this Tag Manager is basically a layer to allow you to do that. And it's particularly useful if you have a lot of e-commerce. It's a definite must be common. So the way you want to approach this is, the first part is, of course, getting the GA4 account. That should be your ID is what you get first, and then you go to your Google Tag Manager, where there's an actual Google Tag Manager ID that's given, and and then what you want to do is that there's containers, tags, and triggers. I won't go through all of this for our presentation for today because it would have made it a 2-hour deal. But the short of it is that the tags and triggers are where you would add in information based off of what you've gathered in terms of where you want your white papers to be downloaded, where you want your videos to be clicked when someone's playing on someone's doing video playback. This is where this information goes, and some of this you probably would want to work with a developer on, because there's also what's called a data layer, which I'll get to. A layer also allows you to add e-commerce information. So if you know that you have a lot of products you're offering, you may want to work with a developer for that part. So what can you do with a lot of the with the measurements? Well, there's a lot of these are very familiar if you're already, but the things you can identify to be measured, page views, page scrolling, which is important if somebody is reading a page. If you have content and you are trying to be the next Huffington Post, having page scrolling can help you understand if people are really consuming or spending time on a page, 2 seconds on it, and then picking off to someplace else. That's really important if you're trying to attract advertisers, be able to give them an idea of what measurement, how much time people are spending on your pages in general. Clicks to external links. There's an outlink reporting, which I'll talk to search, which I'll get to also later on. That's another thing that can be helpful to you, as well as video plays. Again, I mentioned about file downloads, which gets to white papers. And then also, again, retail information, which placed in a data layer to help record when something is being purchased, basically. And by record just means, basically more than anything else, rather than the deeper transactional metrics. So let's talk a little bit about data layer for a moment. So I mentioned data layer and tag manager go together, basically. And this is something that I'm going to mess with too much. This is really something that if you're doing e-commerce, this is really where you want a developer to come in. And the reason why is because much of this is set up as JavaScript code, basically as a JavaScript pair. But as a business owner, you can list out again to what are the products or IDs that you want. One quick thing, and this is about privacy and consent deal. Within Tag Manager, you can set up a consent tag, which fires when the page is loaded to ask someone for consent to be after consent is given. So this is actually where and consent is a big deal now. Basically, it's actually a must more than anything else. But this is where you would want to have that set up for quite a bit. And you have some options here. For example, you can set up, let's say you're operating outside of New York and you're operating in Europe. You want to keep in mind a lot of the privacy issues for the EU. So if you're doing that, you can set up tags for region-specific behaviors to try to, if you have a web page that's in a subdirectory that loads maybe only for people who are based in the EU, for example. So that is an option here. Now I won't go through this too deeply, but once you've, some of this is a little bit, we talked a little bit in the previous presentation. We talked about advertising, basically digital ads. The key thing you want to keep in mind here in planning, this kind of goes back to a little bit the planning piece. In general, you plan your ads based off of how people are searching online. And you think about it in terms of online versus maybe say searching in Pinterest versus searching in Snapchat. Remember, I showed that there was a Pinterest trends, a Snapchat trends, and a Google trends. Platforms for measuring, seeing what volume is going on. You want to think about that in terms of planning your advertising. And you can do this in a couple of different ways. You can plan it around a general search where people are looking for attributes or products, basically. So that could be something in terms of it could be clothing, maybe clothing for a specific event. Branded search is when people are looking for a particular brand, or even your business. So keeping those two things in mind, you can then go back and try to think about the categories of media that you'd like to deal with in terms of if it's a paid digital ads cover a wide range of things, not just radio and television these days, but not just digital these days, but also radio, even connected TV these days. And you can use that to kind of help figure out what sort of campaigns you want. And we'll talk a little bit about campaign tags in a moment. So campaign tags. So once you've thought about your advertising, if you're using advertising and which channels you want to use it on, you want to think about, this is where your UTM tags come in to play. UTM tags actually is it's called it stands for manager. And it's basically an old legacy term. In fact, the Google Analytics was first called Urchin Analytics way back before Google bought it in like 2006 or so. So, but that UTM part stuck. And you've seen these before, basically. They are the extensions you see on a URL, and maybe see a UTM source, and then equals, and maybe say Twitter or Facebook, and then maybe another ampersand and so forth. These are extensions added to the URL that tell the analytics the name of the campaign, the source of where the link is coming. It was originally designed for digital ads, but over the years, people plan, as you probably saw in social media, particularly with Twitter, people use those tags for social media. They have something they're sharing on Twitter versus Facebook. So there's a couple ways you can do this. And I'm doing presentations, but the short of it is that there is a URL builder that you can go and actually create a label and create the tags. There is a way of viewing concatenation in Excel, where you can go back and have a spreadsheet, have like one column for your campaign, and then one for a type of labeling your campaign. And if you concatenate that together, you can take that result, copy it, and paste that into your digital ad. So the idea is adding these tags helps you when you're doing social media that you're posting, and kind of getting an idea of to help you understand when somebody's clicking on something from those channels. One real quick piece I'm going to talk about real quickly here. There is one more tag. There is a new UTM. This is relatively new. It's been around 360, I believe, but it just got rolled into GA4, and it's starting. You'll see this a lot more. It's the campaign ID, and that's the UTM ID. And what this is that it's a little bit more for uploading a list of campaigns into maybe Google Ads. Gives you a chance to have one more layer to identify the campaign. So right here, you can kind of see a version of this. Here's our example website, example pet store, for example, .com. And then the tag starts here. You get there's a question mark to tell the browser. UTM ID gives you this sort of identifier, then you get equal, and then you get this sort of funky number right here, basically, or actually funky number and this ABC, this whole little code. So you can see this part here is this part here. Then you get an ampersand, UTM campaign equals is for a summer sale. And then completely down the line. So it kind of has the same format as a URL or UTM tag. It's just that now we have this UTM ID. And it's just another layer that Google's adding in here to help in identifying it's really much more for e-commerce more than anything else. Okay, so up to this point, we've talked about planning, starting up with Google Analytics, adding the Google Tag Manager. We talked a little bit about tags for campaigns. So those are kind of like the three biggies starting off. Now what I'm going to do is get into the reports, and there's more reports than I have here basically, but I want to give you some core pieces so that way you have an idea of where to start. Google Analytics has always been this, has always had this menu. Basically, it kind of feel like it's a lot of things here, but it's really four particular pieces here that are being transferred over from the UA. You have what's called life cycle. This is part of, this used to be called acquisition under Universal Analytics. And what life cycle just means is the sources people are, how it answers the question where people are coming from to your website and app. Then you have user, which used to be called audience. So this is answering the question, what type of visitors you have as an aggregate. And I put emphasis on the word aggregate because you want to have an idea of where people are coming from. You want to have some hints that see if those people are matching up to the expected persona that you have for your brand, for your product or service. The third one is events. As I mentioned before, this is activity on the page. In Universal Analytics, it used to be still, the metric conversion is still used, but the way that it gets measured is a little bit different for UA4. It's a little bit more technical and a lot more than I want to go into. But the short of this is that you want to see where people are clicking on, is the site traffic, words, are people coming to click on that video that you have, or click to download that white paper? Having that there helps to distinguish the type of traffic you have and kind of value each referral source. And we'll get to that in a moment. Explore deals with more basically, there's a couple, that's kind of like where a lot of the reporting has been moved to from the old Universal Analytics, but it gets into behavior, and you kind of need to have that to understand if somebody clicked on something, is there any subsequent behavior? We'll have a couple examples for that. And configure is just where you go back, there's like a debug view dimensions, but we won't get into that too deeply here. But keep in mind, for this, keep this slide in mind if you're kind of confused on where to start. This slide is designed to help you for that, to help you understand where everything's gathered. The really big referral traffic, answering the question, where are people coming from in a general sense? And so referral traffic is very helpful. Gives you a number of different metrics, give you a number of users, which used to be called visitors at one point in Google Analytics. The users, and you might be scratching your head going, why would I want to understand new users versus users? Well, if you just launched a website, you may want to categorize or rank your referral sources based on who's sending more new people to your site. So between this organic, you might be finding that there are more new people discovering you through organic. That will be a hint for you to say that maybe I need to be spending more time on my SEO, maybe maybe digital ads around maybe organic search, something that can help you in terms of now there's no real benchmark off the top of my head, but I would imagine new users at the very beginning for a launch is usually high, like 60 to 70%, maybe even 80%, but you should see some drop off over time, just a little bit. And that's useful if you're trying to be the next Huffington Post and you're doing a publication. You want to see it probably an even mix if you can. Engagement time is important. Event count just kind of says, how many events are going off. That can help you in terms of, which channel is driving to people who are clicking on your videos and so forth. Conversion is part of that as well. And then if you're doing e-commerce or retail, revenue is called out as well too. Now you can exclude or include referral sources. That is helpful if you don't want as part of your reporting, or if you want to show, maybe let's say you're social media oriented, you just want to show the social media platforms in the reporting, you can do that here too, basically. So I won't get into it too deeply, but that's something that you can do within the referrals. A second spot you want to think about, if you're just starting off and you're not sure where to start, you can even think about geographic. This is actually when Greg was around. Greg operated his studio and his music business from Chicago, but he was, in fact, his DJ service was Midwest, and he used to operate around Milwaukee, Michigan, Indiana, Chicago. We actually used a geographic map to go back and see which state was sending the most visits, to help him understand, if he had played his band in a certain state, is it leading to people's so geographics can be very helpful depending on how you're operating. It can get down to city. I know this is for New York Greater Chamber of Commerce. I know people may be interested in boroughs. Google Analytics doesn't get to that level of detail. But there's a couple of things that can be done if you really need that type of detail, basically. But most people, if you just need a direction of which state or which general locality, let's say Newark versus Hartford, Connecticut, Google Analytics geographic reports can help you with that. Surface level reporting. Now I'm going to talk about kind of getting a little bit in depth. Google has a number of different reports, but they used to be separate throughout the menu. They've actually blended it under a section called explorations. So like, for example, there's one called path, and I'm going to point to it right here. If you can see my mouse and my cursor, what that does is that it helps you to it's sort of a Sankey visualization to show you if people are navigating from one page to another page to another page. Now you may be thinking, why would I want to know e-commerce? If you are a publication, you might want to know if people are dropping out at certain spots. Of the original version of this in the Universe Analytics, there's actually a report that shows where people are dropping out. This version doesn't quite do it in the same way, help you to see what you can still kind of go back and see if people are taking second and third steps. That can help you not only with understanding content, what may be appealing to people and retaining people longer, which again, if you're trying to get sponsorship, that might be helpful. It may help you also understanding placed and optimized where people are reading through. Real quick example, I worked with a government contractor years ago before I even started Zamana. And one of the things we found in general was that while there were some people that were coming in to check out partner on a large bid, there were a number of people that were coming through who were actually looking for jobs. And that's really important if you need to have a body of people resumes ready to go and figuring out, how do we attract that? So that's kind of what these type of reports can help you with. They kind of help you. So there's a bunch of these. I'm going to talk a little bit about one of them in particular called Cohort. But you have a template gallery that allows you to kind of select your choices. And a lot of these are in terms of bar charts, scatter plots. I mentioned about a flow chart as well. And you can adjust these by date range. I usually tell people think about 30-day, 60-day, and 90-day periods, but you can adjust that if you know that there's certain past events that may be helpful. Let's say that you know that you have a cycle that's 120 days. You can adjust the date range for that. Another thing that you want to keep in mind is that so that might be helpful if you want to break out by referral traffic and let's say by city, or referral traffic and by country. So that can help you in kind of breaking those things apart as well. Now to do this has kind of been working with this a little bit on labeling, but in general, the way this is set up is that you go to the main menu and you look up for explorations. When you do, you sort of see this this menu here on the left-hand side. And the way this works in you from a restaurant, you have one set up for dimensions and metrics, another set up for the visualization, whether it's a table, a bar graph, a line graph, or a geography map. And then you have what's called the which is basically this canvas that you see here that arranges the report. So dimensions, just to kind of touch upon this, dimensions are, think of it as a scoreboard. Dimensions are the for referral traffic, it may be the sources that you're interested in. Think of it as if you have a scoreboard, dimensions is 4. So you might want a dimension, you may want something that shows dimensions for referral traffic, metrics for the sessions, and then maybe the type of graph that you want, and then exploration. I'm going to keep us going here because it's about 10:40 my time. So there's a lot of different reports you can do. Cohort is really helpful here. If you haven't heard of a cohort analysis, you probably will hear a lot more about it. Cohort analysis is basically helping to determine a customer segment. I mentioned about the path flow report. Well, you might want to figure out, are people reaching certain pages or certain events over maybe days? Cohorts can help you to do that basically. So it's you can call it out again under analysis, which is the Explorers Hub basically. They renamed it a little bit later. But this has a limit to it. You can only do 60 cohorts and it displays the top 15 dimensions. That should be useful for most cases. But if your website is elaborate, if your product, you look at exporting the data. We'll get to that in a bit, basically. Events. Now you may want to make adjustments on events. There is an adjustment on the events that you called out in the reporting. It does allow you to, Google does allow you to put a label together in the UI. This is kind of a big deal because again, it saves you some time from going back into the tag manager and resetting the code. So they actually they give a very good convenient user interface that allows you to rename an event. So you might need to rename a white paper the Johnson, basically. So that feature is built in there. So with this in mind, you may be thinking, well, what are great questions to ask? Well, there's a lot of things you can ask. You want to ask yourself, are there metrics that are showing a change in demand, an increase or decrease? You can have spikes for something, obviously, but you're trying to get a very general trend from Google Analytics or from any analytics tool, whether it's Google, Adobe, Matomo. And you may want to think about it in terms of time frame. I mentioned about 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, but again, you may have major events that might make a difference, or even the pandemic, to be honest with you. That you can probably look at 2 years and see if there's been a change in the amount of search traffic that you received, or combining that with Google Search Console, has there been changes in that would be a good analysis. Thinking about what the cost benefit from a referral source would be. If each one of these referral sources for traffic could be Facebook, Google, again, you may be spending a little bit on digital ads. You should be thinking about, am I seeing conversions? The conversion rate will always be a little bit low. It's okay. In some cases, even single digits may be okay. But am I seeing a lift? That's what you want to get out of that. Are there campaigns that are performing well for the quarter? That's a great thing to look at most. And again, you can break that up by time. And all these should trigger some questions for you. What resources are immediately available for me if I need to make changes? What can be done soon? And are there opportunities to even streamline my efforts to reach my audience? In other words, if I'm using ads within Facebook, that means there may be something going on that channel. So is there maybe another way or something else I should be using to reach that audience? Another quick report that can be helpful. I'm going to try to, I know we got quite a few slides here, but I'm going to try to wrap up real quickly. Site search can be helpful words. If you have a site that's publishing out a lot of blog content, sometimes people are looking for particular words. Seeing that can help you understand, and kind of keeping track of that periodically can help you understand what people are looking for in general. And that might trigger some ideas for maybe we need to offer this a little bit more item. Sometimes it could be something as simple as a product mention. Outbound links. You can click out, you can actually set up a reporting event to see if people are clicking and leaving onto a partner site. That's what this is set up for. This is set up within the admin. There's a gear that you click when you set up your data stream. And when you do that, it'll have it's just basically a toggle. Requires 24 hours to update, but using this can help you understand if you have partners that you've indicated as an outbound link, you can kind of see if people are clicking on those. Now all of this, you can keep this in a dashboard for sharing metrics with a team. Pretty much when you first open up Google Analytics, you have a dashboard. You can set up cards as you wish to help kind of manage a certain, and they can show like pretty much updates from each one of the report time, which is really handy if you're just trying to figure out where people are coming from. Now, with all this being said, all this I just up to this point is within Google Analytics. I'm going to real quickly go and I'm going to go through the next couple of slides real quick because we're coming up on this with 15 minutes left. But one of the things you want to talk about is outside of Google Analytics, you can do additional reporting in Data Studio. Data Studio is helpful if you know that some of the metrics you need have to be calculated into something else and then visualizes a graph. So think of this as an additional layer. You have Google Analytics, another layer, Data Studio, that you can use for visualizations, additional calculations, maybe based on events, downloads, visits. You can set that up quite a bit. So that is something that you can, that's where Data Studio can be of a big help. There are connectors in Data Studio. There's a lot of them for different platforms. Google Analytics has a connector where you can import Google data into Data Studio. And there's also a Search Console connector, which probably is very helpful. For certain metrics, you can set up like site impression and URL impression landing page. Some of that can be set up within Google Data Studio by using the Search Console connector. And then there's other galleries within Data Studio that you can use for setting up your reporting. One last piece in here, actually almost done. Two more. I mentioned earlier that like for cohorts, there are some limitations in Google Analytics in terms of in some of the reporting, you can change one column at a time or one setting at a time to see output. If you want to see 2 or 3 things together, one of the things you can do is you can try importing into Data Studio into R programming. Doing that gives you another set of options for you in terms of setting up visualizations. For example, you can import and sort within a data object within R sessions and mediums. So that way you can kind of have a better sorting versus just designed for just one column at a time or one dimension at a time. So something to keep in mind, this is a little bit more advanced, helpful if you think that you need to have it in your reporting in an ongoing basis. And I won't go through this too deeply, but you can also, again, if you're using social media dashboards can be helpful. So summary, again, map out your website and app and the activity that you want, so such that when it's measured, it relates back to your business. Plan for your GA4 tag first, then GTM to set up. And then use your reporting to ask questions. You can start with referral traffic and geographics. Those are probably the 2 easiest things you can start with, frankly, particularly if your team is relatively new. And I can help you and kind of get more familiar with Google Analytics in particular. And then your dashboard options, like I said, you have a dashboard, we can set up a card, Data Studio for advanced, where off the metrics, and then you can have some set up within R if you know you need to do more sorting. And I should also mention statistical analysis. There's something you need to do as a forecast. That's an option for you as well. But again, dedicate some sort of period to review your analysis. Again, giving yourself an hour gives you a, periodically gives you a chance. And I would say periodically, trying to do this every day is not necessary unless you're running campaigns on an everyday basis where you need reports. And even then that might be questionable. But whatever you do, update way before July 1st, 2023. If you're coming in at May and June, you really risk losing a lot of analysis. So get in early, try early to get started. And with that, I'm going to take some time to answer some questions. And I know I've covered quite a bit.
Oh my God.
Elaine,
I'm here. Oh, amazing. And there were good there's good information because a lot of people didn't know that there was a deadline. And I think
Yeah,
that's really, really important. Does anyone have any questions this is the time to ask Pierre directly. Hold on, I'm going into the questions. What do we need to think about in deciding whether to choose a new GA4 account or connect to an existing account?
perfect question. Thank you, Jill. That's a good question. The source, a new GA4 is really much more if you just are starting from scratch. You've never had a Google Analytics before, to be honest with you. A lot of times people are starting an app. They are, which there is a version for this. You can actually have, if it's iOS or Android, Google Analytics SDK for that development. So make sure if you're doing an app, make sure your developer plugs that in. Or if you're just launching a website. So that's where the new comes in. The connecting would be for something along the lines of, I have a universal analytics. We've had analytics for a while. I need to make an update. That's what that's for. So that's your short answer.
A lot of people have, you know what, because of the type of content, everyone, I can't even ask, everyone's been asking, yes, you're going to get a copy of the PowerPoint presentation. And it is being recorded. It will be on Chamber TV. And then also, you know what, reach out to Pierre. You're more than welcome to reach out to Pierre. Anyone have any questions? You know what, Pierre, hit on, which was interesting to me, you know, on the social media, the analytics on that, because I know that you were concerned with the time and people, let me see if there's any questions, but if you wanted to elaborate a little bit, you know, because a lot of people are using social media, and the best way to, you know, I want you to use the extra 7 minutes. If something, why don't you do this? If a question pops up, I'll interrupt you, but if not, keep on going, because a lot of people are really interested in this.
Okay, so here's the play on the social media. And this slide, by the way, this one I have up here is literally the same one I have from the as well too. I put it here because a lot of times when it comes to analysis, there's kind of two parts of it. You want to analyze what people are doing on a particular platform. You may have said, hey, you know, Helena may come and say, hey, Pierre, I want to be dominant on Twitter. So I use my Twitter social to see how I'm engaging on that platform. But then going back into Google Analytics, I'm gonna go back to the referral. The thing that you want to look for is, are those people coming from that platform to your website? So the idea is that you have, so there's kind of a two-layer here. And it doesn't matter which platform you started with. If you know that Snapchat is what you're comfortable with, that's what you start with. If you know TikTok is what you're comfortable with, that's what you start with. Instagram, Twitter, so forth. But the idea, you want to think about a dashboard, and that could be Hootsuite, for example. I mentioned Hootsuite before, and go back here again. So this is actually Hootsuite right here in the middle. Hootsuite is useful for trying to figure out how people are communicating, noticing or Instagram, for example, and responding to that. That type of engagement back and forth is what drives people. And then the next step is going back into the Google Analytics and seeing, okay, now that I've driven people on a given platform, am I seeing something here where people are actually exploring? Doing those two things helps you. It can help you with managing your time. I think that's one big part of it. Budget, if you're using digital ads, it can help you in terms of kind of ranking where you could be spending your time much more effectively to build leads and building for emergencies too. I'll mention this real quickly, Helena. Way back when they had the Charlottesville riot back in, I think, I want to say 26, it's got to be after 2016, 2017, 2018 or so, when they had the tiki torches. That made those tiki torches went to Facebook first to tell the world that they were not associated with the Proud Boys and all the other people on there. The reason why they were able to do that was because they had used their audience. In fact, I actually looked and saw they had a larger audience on Facebook than they went to the one medium where they can get their message out fast. So from a PR standpoint, particularly even though you can rank the order, doesn't mean you get to ignore your channels, but you rank the order on which one gets to your audience first. So that can be also as important as well. Questions on here. Jill, this is from Jill. I'm gonna read this off. If we set up a GA4 account now, are we then only checking that account for information, or are we still checking the original? Okay. So here's the thing. You can set up right now, between now and July next year. In other words, what Google will allow you to do is switch back and forth. You'll actually will see in the admin, there's actually, they'll show like one account will be a Universal Analytics, and you'll see the Universal Analytics ID underneath it. And then you'll see a second one that's actually a J4 ID. The IDs are a little bit different. The UA will start with UA dash and then series of numbers, and then the GA4 is a G dash and a series of numbers. So the short of it is that you want to, if you're making a transition, most analytics professionals should be recommending a dual if you could do it. And part of the reasoning is that it makes it a lot easier for you. If you've been using Universal Analytics, there may be some reporting that you may want to identify which reporting that was important to you. Universal identify if it's changed in GA4, because some stuff has changed, basically. Not all of it. Some of the basic ones I showed you about referral traffic, that's fine. But some of the other ones like cohort, path flow was another one in particular. If you're using that regularly in Universal Analytics, workflow in GA4. So you want to identify those things and kind of figure out, okay, do I need to do something in Data Studio? If I'm doing prediction, do I need to put that in R programming? So the short answer is you should have access to both when you select both in the GA setup assistant. So I hope that answers your questions, Jill.
Thank you, Jill. Pierre, is your last slide with your contact information?
Yes, it is. My last slide.
Can you put that on? Because people were asking for your contact information.
Yes.
So there, do you want to just close it up?
I'll read it off. Yes. So you can reach me. I'm on LinkedIn, Twitter quite a bit. Zamana Analytics is the handle. Instagram quite a bit, and of course you can find us on Clubhouse. Elena and I have been this has been probably one of the best things that happened this year was getting a chance to and my email, you can contact me at main@zamana.com. That's kind of the company email as well. If you have questions or if you need consultation, yes, shameless plug, shameless. And I work with clients who either they have reporting issues or they have to work with you on anything and on our programming as well too. So there you go. And we'll have this out. I also will have a couple of articles. There's a slide on here that I'm going to tighten up a little bit and send over to Helena this afternoon. There's articles I've written on Google Analytics that may be of help to you. I'm going to add those in as well. So
thank you so much, Pierre. And you know what? We are just so thankful for this information today. Number one. Number two is, again, you know what? If you have further questions and you really want to, deep dive into social media platforms and what people are doing around the world, because, Mondays at 2:00, we're always on, except for, holidays. We go on and we just have open discussions, and we can range from 30 people to just 3 people just discussing what works to help grow your business. And what's great about Clubhouse is it's audio, it's not visual, so you can definitely multitask and still do your work. but you're really going to get an idea of how other people grow their business, and you learn a lot. I've learned it's a lot of fun. So that's Monday at 2:00. This coming Tuesday at 10:00, we have our online networking. After the Wednesday after Labor Day, we have an in-person networking at the Jane Doe Lounge at 9:00. It's RSVP at chamber.nyc. And then we also, don't forget, everyone, mark your calendar, September 23rd, our annual business expo. If you're interested in a table, let me know. It's free to walk around. We're going to have representatives from local, city, state, federal agencies, small, medium-sized companies, major corporations, international consulates, and diplomats will be there. So definitely join us. We so appreciate everyone joining us today. I hope you learned a lot. I put a smile on my face because, again, this is over my head, and Pierre is the person to go to. So, and I see a lot of people held on to the end. So I know that this information is important and prevalent for you to operate your business. So reach out to Pierre. I always say you can always ask me, but for this, reach out to Pierre because it's over my head. Everyone, you know what? It's Thursday. We're one day away from a weekend. Be safe, be well, enjoy this beautiful weather. And again, I hope to see you next Monday at 2:00 or Tuesday online for our networking. Bye, everyone. Bye, Pierre. Thank you again.
Thank you again for having me. Take care, everybody.
Bye, everyone.